You were tuned into the Muse Report. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. This was a really good interview I had with Mr. Preston Foster, and it's honestly one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. We just really got into some things that I think really will resonate with not only me, but everyone listening. Mr. Foster is currently a political science professor at Oakwood University. He's also had a very successful career attending Harvard, working with AT&T, working in the White House for a couple of years, and then finally getting into education. And his story is absolutely magnificent, and the amount of golden nuggets of wisdom that he gives in this episode is just outstanding. And honestly, if anything, I don't know how many of you really listen to an entire episode. I know some of them might be a little lengthy, but if anything, I want you guys to, if anything, go to the last 15 minutes of this episode. That's the part that I really want you guys to listen to. Everything else is really good too, but if you do anything and you don't want to listen to the whole thing, maybe you don't have time, I get it. Go to those last 15 minutes, and I know that you'll be impacted greatly. Thank you guys for doing what I requested. In the past couple episodes, you've been screenshotting your phones. For all those who have been participating and screenshotting your phones, showing that you're listening, supporting, it really does help me see who's out there, who's listening, who's participating, and I really appreciate it. Keep on taking those screenshots, tagging the Muse Report podcast in it. I'll be posting it on the Muse Report podcast story, shouting you guys out. We're going to get right on into this one, man. Let's go. Let's do it. Theme song.
Loading.
Extra, read all about it.
It's a case study for success.
Be teachable.
What better way to learn than to just ask?
The learning process becomes a journey,
turning dreams into realities.
Part of execution is totally believing whatever you're doing is going to work.
What are your passions and what are your gifts? And that's where it really starts.
Chances are for taking. Take a chance on yourself.
Andy and everyone's getting the whole thing, and you
You're not going to have all the answers immediately.
Wow.
Mentors to expose you to things that you otherwise wouldn't know.
It was all I thought about and dreamed. Like I would literally get up in the morning, practice, because I knew the time would come.
just do it.
Campground, a place called Victory Lake Camp, Northeastern Conference Campground. It was like 103 acres, 100 miles north of New York City.
Oh, wow.
And my father was the caretaker of the camp. And so during the summer, there were kids from New York City who came up there for 6 weeks at a time to be away from the city. And then in the fall, we had that 103 acres to ourselves.
Right.
We had basketball court,
Jeez.
baseball diamond, all of that kind of stuff. So our local friends used to just come there after school, and we used to go at it.
That sounds like his dream.
Yeah, because we tennis court, swimming pool, all of that. It was like we were rich without money.
Right, exactly.
And went to boarding school, Pine Forge Academy, and then Oakwood. But I started my career at AT&T directly out of Oakwood. I was when I was at Oakwood my junior year, I was student government president, the USM president. And the next year, I was Oakwood's first co-op student out at Redstone Arsenal, buying missile parts, Tomahawk missile parts, stuff like that. And a lady who's still here and thriving, Miss Jan Ross, was our placement officer. And so one day, I'm out there at Redstone working, And she called me up just about 3:30 one afternoon, and she said, Preston, there's a guy here from AT&T, a recruiter, and hardly anyone has been here to see him. Could you do me a favor and stop by and see him when you get off of work? And I remember it was a rainy day, and I was like, oh, man, I just wanted to go home and chill out. But she had done so much for me. I said, okay, I'll go. And when I started talking to the recruiter, a guy named Ken Lewis, a black guy, and I'm envisioning, the phone company climbing telephone poles. It's like, I don't want to do that.
That's what I envisioned too.
Yeah, climbing telephone poles, doing installations. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And he started talking about, no, we have like a corporate marketing department where you sell to large businesses and, wear a white shirt and tie and all of that. And I was like, oh. Well then. And so long story short, I drove to Birmingham and took a test. And the test that they had was kind of like a 7th, 8th grade math and vocabulary test. And it was so easy to me. I was like, this is some kind of trick. But what struck me, because I know part of your theme is success, is how few of us took that opportunity. You're here in college and you walk by these bulletin boards that have all these opportunities. Well, these are like real opportunities on these boards that people walk by. And it's like you're literally passing opportunities by. And took the test, went on a couple interviews, and then I got a letter from them in March, right before I graduated, offering me a job and more money than my father was making at the time. And they had all these benefits. And I was like, okay,
Sold.
Jesus, I'm going to Birmingham.
Right.
And I'm from New York, but Birmingham was like, my father told me, and I should have started with this. My father told me when he sent me to college, he said, you get 4 years in college, and whether or not you graduate, and after you graduate, don't think about coming home. So when I was here in school, here at Oakwood at school, from the time I was a sophomore, I was interviewing. And my sophomore year, I had a guy from Xerox, which was a hot company back then, ready to hire me. And he said, when do you graduate? I said, 2 years from now. And so he said to me, oh, and this is a black guy too. His name was Prince Poe. For some reason, I remember his name.
That's a memorable name.
Right. So Prince Poe, when I told him I wasn't graduating for 2 years, he dropped the roll and he said, let me tell you what the deal is. He said, if I were you, I would go into marketing because that's the best place for a black male to be in corporate life because you can put your numbers up on a board as opposed to having to play just the regular corporate politics. And if your numbers are high enough, they'll speak for you, even though politically you may not be in with anyone.
Right.
And I always remember, I was like, I really appreciated that advice. And he said, you can make the most money.
Really?
And for years, I didn't get my master's degree until I was 32 or 33 because I was literally making too much money in AT&T corporate marketing. And AT&T trained me. And when I say trained, they trained me both technically and how to do corporate sales. And they also trained me about how to present yourself as an executive. I was about to say a sales professional, but at the level I'm talking about, we had accounts like Home Depot and IBM and those types of companies.
Huge company.
Huge, Fortune 100 companies.
Right, yeah.
And so for a black guy from New York who's in his early 20s to be taken seriously by senior executives, it takes some training. But it also gives you like a great deal of confidence, maybe too much confidence. But, because you're making deals. By the time I was 26, 27, I had accounts worth $50 million a year. I had like 6 accounts that were billing, and this is like in the early 1980s. $50 million a year that I'm responsible for.
Right.
And so I had a corporate American Express card. I'm flying all over the country, taking my customers out. After I left Birmingham, I moved to Atlanta. We had Hawks tickets. We had Braves tickets. We had, the sky boxes, all of that kind of, because it was all on AT&T.
Right.
And so that's how I began my career. And because of that blessing, like I said, I had a lot of exposures and it gave me a lot of confidence. And it also showed me that the people who are at these high levels are not that smart. And when I say not that smart, they're smart, but they're high average smart.
Right. Okay.
It's like, okay, I can hang.
I can hang with you.
I can hang with them.
Yeah.
A little bit more training, a little bit more exposure. I can hang.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for about 10 years. And then I got a sales manager who had just gotten his MBA from Harvard, a guy named John Wilson. And John was about a year or two older than me. And he was a very bright guy, but it was like, okay, he went to Harvard.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I worked for him for about 2 years. And the whole 2 years, I was like grilling him about Harvard. And after hanging out with him, again, he's a very bright guy, but it's like, he wasn't like flying.
Right.
He didn't have wings. It's like, if he could do it, I think I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
So then one alumni weekend, I used to come back every year. They had this thing called Youth Motivation Task Force at Oakwood, which is people who were in the work world, in the corporate world, would come back to Oakwood to tell students, this is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that like 16 times.
They still do that or no?
I'm not sure.
That sounds like that sounds good.
Yeah, it was a great program.
Yeah, that's networking city.
Right. Because I remember one time I was remind me where I was, because I was telling a class, I was probably about 27 then, and somebody asked me, do you have your MBA? And I said, no. And they said, why not? I said, I'm making too much money.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the teacher looking like, don't tell him that. And I'm like, well, it's true.
It's true.
I'm making like vice presidential money.
Right.
And I'm 27 with a BA degree. So when I saw my sales manager, this Harvard MBA guy, and I was like, he has two shoes. He has a pair of pants. It's like, he's human.
Right.
And he says smart stuff. He says not so smart stuff, kind of like me.
Right.
So I come back for Youth Motivation Task Force, and I meet back then a young lady, and I started dating her. And through dating her, one time we were going out, and she said to me, I'm going to introduce you to a guy that you're going to love. He's just like you. So this is, she was friends with his wife, and so it was kind of like a double dating.
Right, okay.
So we go to this picnic, the in-house picnic on a Sunday afternoon, and this is during the NBA Finals. There's Magic and Bird going at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking to this guy, and he's talking to me while the game is on. I'm like, what kind of guy is this talking to me while this game is going on?
I'm trying to focus on the game,
right,
man.
So I said, what do you want to do? He said, well, I work with IBM, and I'm an account executive with IBM, and I want to go to the Kennedy School at Harvard, and then I want to be a White House fellow. And those were precisely my next career goals. But I was intimidated by it.
Already? You already knew that you wanted to do. Okay.
Independent from that. I knew I didn't want an MBA because I felt like I already have that from AT&T.
Right.
My passion has always been with politics. And so my goal at AT&T was actually to be the head of the AT&T Foundation.
Okay.
Okay. Because then I control how we do good.
Right.
Okay. So that going to the Kennedy School at Harvard was going to be my transition from marketing to the foundation work. So it's like, I said, that's exactly, his name is Rod McCowan, still my friend. I said, that's exactly what I want to do. So to make a long story short, he did both of those things a year before I did them. And it was like God sent me a concierge to say, wow, this is how you're going to, I know you want to do this, but I know you're a little afraid of it because you haven't done it. So I'm going to send you kind of a big brother. And this guy literally walked me through the process for both Harvard and White House fellowship. So while he was at Harvard in school, and he was at Harvard the same time Barack Obama was there.
Wow, okay.
Okay. So when I went to visit him, I went and spent 3 days at Harvard to visit, to see, like, again, can I hang?
Right.
So he was telling me, he said, man, there's this guy here at the law school. and they say he's going to be a U.S. senator, and some people think he's going to be the first black president. And I said, what's his name? And he said Barack Obama. I'm like, there's no way that guy's going to, I can't even say that, because I was looking like, you got to have like a kind of waspy name.
Exactly, yeah.
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. That's what I thought the same thing, man.
Right. It's like, this guy, But even then, I learned Obama, the same thing they were saying about him then is the same thing they're saying about him now.
Mm.
They said his narrative was, this guy could go to work for any law firm, but he's going to Chicago and he's doing his volunteer work. And so they were talking about how righteous this guy is because he was the first head of the law review, first black head of the law review at Harvard. So I went with Rod to classes at Harvard for 3 days, just visiting. And I was like, same thing, sit in the classrooms. Like some people say smart things, some people say not so smart things. I can hang in here.
Mm-hmm.
He also introduced me to the admissions officer. And because he was kind of like the Black Prince of the Kennedy School, I'm like, I'm Rod's friend.
Right. Yeah.
So they're like, this is another Rod.
Right. Okay.
So by the time I applied, and even while I was applying, he had a team of Black Harvard grads or present Harvard students helping me formulate my essays.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty rough. But now in retrospect, it was like, man, I really needed that help.
Yeah. So
by the time I submitted my application, I was fairly certain I was going to get accepted. And I say this to my students. I graduated from Oakwood with a 3.0. Okay. And Harvard is the only grad school I ever applied to.
And wow.
Okay.
3.0.
Yeah. So, and I say that to brag on God. Because 3.0 and Harvard don't go together. But it was, because of what I had done, my experience at AT&T, and for 3 out of 4 years, I was in the top 5% of salespeople at AT&T at the corporate level. I guess Harvard figured out he must be smarter than his GPA.
Right.
And the fact that I had this vision about heading the foundation at AT&T. So part of the question is, why do you want to come here?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very clear, tangible reason for wanting to go there.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked. And then 2 years later, I went through the same process with the same guy for the White House Fellowship. And the White House Fellowship is a 1 year, it's not an internship, it's a fellowship. Colin Powell was a White House Fellow in 1972. That's how he met Dick Cheney and all of the people who promoted him up. It's a 1 year fellowship at the highest level of government. So you work for either the president, the vice president, or a cabinet member. So I worked for the Secretary of Education.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you go to the very highest levels. You're walking in and out of the White House. You're walking in and out of the Secretary of Education's office. And you see, like, there are smart people here, but there are not so smart people here. And I can hang.
All right.
But it also, for me, satisfied kind of the need to always be at the top and impress people, because you find that these people at high levels, not all of them are happy. Not all of them have good family lives.
Mm-hmm.
Not their kids don't necessarily like all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But you also meet like some of the most righteous people you'll ever meet. And people ask me, and I'm pretty cynical, but they ask me, like, when you went to Washington, did you become more cynical?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is, I actually left Washington less cynical than I came.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and that's a surprising thing, because the people that you see on the news are like maybe the 5%.
Right.
They're the 5% who are like trying to get to the top, and they make these it's like political theater.
Mm-hmm.
So they get their name in the news, and they kind of create kind of fake controversy.
Right. Yeah.
Most people in Washington are actually trying to do the right thing.
I feel like that's the case for the news in most of the world.
Yeah.
The 5% that you see on the news,
right,
is a whole other 95%. People are actually trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me, I assumed it was the other way around about Washington.
Yeah.
I assume like most of these people here are on the make. They're all kind of slimy, etc. But people like Janet Reno, who headed the Justice Department then, Secretary Riley, who headed the Department. These are like some of the most righteous people I ever met. They were like there for public service. And it sounds corny, but it's like they were, this is during the Clinton administration, during the Monica Lewinsky stuff, all of that. And they were like, look, we're here to serve. And I was like, wow, this is behind closed doors. You know, they're telling we're here to serve. So I was like, okay, I can get with that. So I did that, and then I went back to AT&T for a few years. After that, the woman that I worked for at the Department of Education, Dr. Sharon Robinson, who was my boss, was the number 2 person at Educational Testing Service in Princeton, New Jersey. And ETS writes the SAT test. So I wasn't trying to work for ETS. I was actually trying to be, trying to head the United Way in D.C. So I called her and I said, Sharon, I'm trying to, the United Way in D.C. is looking for a CEO. I'm trying to get that job. But I need to know who's on the board and who can connect me to some board members. And she said, I don't know anybody on the board, but I know this guy, Les Francis. Call him. So I called Les. Les had been the deputy chief of staff for Jimmy Carter. Okay. And he ran Mondale's campaign in 1984. And Les was also working at ETS as vice president of communications and public affairs, which is kind of PR and lobbying. So I called him and he said, well, come on up to D.C. and have lunch with me. So I flew up to D.C. just to have lunch with him.
And you were still in Atlanta?
I was still in Atlanta. Okay. Flew up to D.C., had lunch with him in Georgetown, and flew back. And
wow. Wait.
Yeah.
He just flew up for lunch?
Flew up for lunch, literally for lunch.
Okay.
And at the time, that was on my dime. That wasn't on AT&T or anybody else's dime.
Right.
But it was like, okay, Sharon said, go see this guy. I'm going to see him. And I don't know if you've ever had like a bromance, but Les is about 16 years older than me. All right. But we sat down and lunch and we were there 5 minutes and I was like, I like this guy. And we're just talking politics. We weren't talking about, we're just talking, getting to know each other. And long story short, 2 days later, he calls me and he says, Preston, somebody else got the United Way job. But I was wondering if you would think about coming up to Princeton to work for me. And I was like, really? And he said, well, it's for more money and less work.
Okay. Keep talking.
All right. And I was like, more money, less work? So I flew up to Princeton, New Jersey, interviewed around, and Education Testing Service is a funny place. It's in Princeton, New Jersey, in the country. It's a beautiful place. And it's literally a campus with halls. And they call it a campus without students.
Wow.
So you have all of these educational researchers in these halls writing test questions and doing research on why do black people score lower on tests, etc. And they pay very well. It's a $1 billion not-for-profit company. So I'm there. I got this job at ETS, and it's the best job I ever had.
Really?
I mean, because at AT&T, we had a lot of fun, but it was high stress. There was a lot at stake. Because ETS was a not-for-profit, it was, for me, much less stressful. I was literally working 9 to 5. And at AT&T, I would be there some days 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I would leave 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. But the money was good, so I was like, okay, I'm doing this. But at ETS, it was more money and a very civil kind of high-level work. And so I did that for 6 years. But around that time, I found my father was here. My parents retired in Huntsville, and my father was losing his eyesight. And I was like, man, I got to either move them up here with me or somebody needs to be around them. So around that time, I met my present wife, Dr. Julie Moore Foster. She was teaching in the music. She at the time, she was the Aeolian director. And Julie needed to come back to Oakwood. She had been working on her doctorate and finished and needed to come back and fulfill her commitment to Oakwood. So I got ETS to agree to let me move to Huntsville. And they were flying me up to New Jersey, sometimes once or twice a week. So I was commuting between Princeton and Huntsville, making the same money I was making in New Jersey and Huntsville. Again,
you were living in Huntsville.
I was living in Huntsville.
And making the same money?
Making the same money I was making in New Jersey. And, it was like, God is really too good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
But then, this is 2007. 2008, the big recession hit. And so ETS, Educational Testing Service at Preston, we can't afford to do this anymore. We're going to have to lay you off. So he gave me a nice package, and I'm like, I got a pretty tight resume. I got all this Harvard stuff. I'll be able to get another job. But I'm in my late 40s then, and nothing turned up at all. And it's kind of like, you go to start your car, and you're used to it turning over, and it's like the battery's dead.
Right.
And it's like, first you can't even accept the battery's dead. Maybe it's not clicking.
Maybe I just didn't put it in right.
Right. But it's like, this thing is dead.
Yeah.
So I went 3 years basically being unemployed.
Wow.
And it was first time. It was like, what is going on?
That's crazy. Someone from Harvard with all this experience can't get a job?
And I don't know who your listeners are, but I had people that I worked with at ETS who used to work for me, who got jobs at other companies like Pearson. So I was calling them saying, hey, can you hook me up? Because Pearson was paying even better than ETS. And one of them said yes, but after he talked to somebody else who used to work for me, I think they were like, I don't know, because that guy's real ambitious. I think that's what happened. Because I had a good track record. I treated these people right, but I think it was like, he's ambitious, and maybe if he gets here, he might go past us. Right, yeah. So that didn't work. And it was hurtful. It was personally hurtful. And this is the time in your life where it's like, I hope you married the right person. Because we were living well, and now we're unemployed. My parents' health is failing, and it's like, I've been through, it's like, God, have you forsaken me?
Right.
And so then Dr. Ciro Sepulveda, who was then the head of the history department at Oakwood, calls me and says, can you teach some political science courses for us as an adjunct? And I was like, yeah, all right,
Sure.
got to do something.
Right, yeah.
And I started teaching part-time at Oakwood at 2011. And as soon as I started teaching, I was like, I love this.
Wow.
So I say all this to say, like, God will arrange your life.
Yeah.
So if I had to say, like, what is the key to success, it's really fine. It sounds corny and it sounds like some kind of cliche, but it's like, whatever you have in you, because my passion, again, was for public policy, politics. And even though I started off in marketing, I was like, I want to get to that. Because even though I was doing well at AT&T, it was stressful because it was kind of like, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this. When Michael Jordan was in his prime, he played baseball for a year and a half. So me being at AT&T, it was like Michael Jordan playing baseball.
Okay.
But when I got to the Kennedy School and ETS and started teaching, it was like it's like Michael Jordan playing basketball. I'm not saying I'm that good at it, but it was that, like, this is my natural place.
Thing. Yeah.
And when I was a student here at Oakwood, I remember saying and praying that when I'm 50 years old, I want to come back to Oakwood and teach.
Wow.
Okay. When Dr. Sepulveda called me, I was 50 years old. Okay. And I had forgotten I prayed that prayer.
Right.
But it's like, oh yeah, I did ask for this.
Right.
And I forgot. God did not forget that I asked for it. So it's like, if you're trying, I have students and they'll say to me, like, Professor Foster, I want to be a lawyer, but my plan B is. And it's like, look, there is no plan B.
Yeah.
There is no plan. Plan B is to get back on plan A. Okay? Yeah. Because when God was forming you in your mother's stomach, he had plan A in mind. Okay. We may take plan B,
Right.
but his plan is to get you back on plan A, and he will wait you out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you will sometimes, like I forgot about my prayer, forget about what plan A was.
Right.
But it's like, look, I formed you to do a certain thing. And when you start doing that, it's going to be you're going to be good at it, and it'll be fun for you.
Right.
You know, because on Magic, Michael, when they're playing ball, they're having fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, Kobe, all of them. When they're playing ball, this is why athletes cry when they retire.
Yeah.
Because it's like telling a kid, you can't play anymore. It's like, because that's how much fun they're having.
Yeah.
You know, and it's work and it's high pressure, but all of that is fun to them. So what I do now, teaching public policy, political science at Oakwood, I can wake up depressed. I can go teach and come home happy.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
I get, you know how like Monday morning people are like, I don't want to go to work. And I will feel like that until I get in the classroom.
Right.
Then it's like, whoo, Lord, this is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tell my students, it's like, you need to pay attention to who you're going to school with. I know you're trying to impress me because you want a grade,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, it's your peers you need to pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, you know, all the Take Six were like regular guys when they were here.
Yep.
And people were like, oh yeah, they're good. No, they're more than good. They're world class.
Exactly.
I know they're your friends, but you're used to them.
Right.
And so your peers will be, you know, the ballers of the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
And like, don't sleep on the opportunity that you have in front of you right now. And more to the point, not only dream big, and a lot of people have big dreams, but what I find is they have fear, and it's like almost fear of success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fear of being, what if I tried to get to Harvard and didn't? They're like, oh, he tried, but they got rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the rejection, you know, God is like not trying to hide your success from you. When people say no to you, he's closing that door, and he's like, there is an open door if you would just keep your head up and keep walking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and basically get over yourself, because this is not about you, it's about me.
Right.
You know, and what I have for you to do.
Right.
So if you will just keep your head up and walk to the open door, what I have for you is going to be easier than that door you are knocking on.
Mm-hmm.
Easier.
Mm-hmm.
And more successful and more fun. But we have this, especially in this culture that we're in, we have this fear of public failure that controls us.
Yeah.
You know, even now, like, and this is like December, some of my students are getting ready to go home, and they may have changed their major or something, and they're afraid of what the family's going to say when you say, well, I didn't really want to do biology, I'm a political science major.
Mm-hmm.
Political science, what are you going to do with that? It's like, whatever God has ordained for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they, even though parents love you and family love you, they may not see it. Right. Because this is like all these cliches we have, you need to have a personal relationship with God. A personal means you and him,
mm-hmm.
not you, him, and your family. Your family may not see, but when you get to that successful level, then your family's going to be happy.
Right.
They want you to be
it.
successful.
Yeah.
Right now, they just want you to be successful in the way that they can envision.
Sometimes that want for you to do well and be successful is exactly what gets in the way of them seeing what really needs to happen in your life.
Yeah. And to be more honest, sometimes it's about them.
Yeah.
You know,
mm-hmm.
they want to say, my son's studying medicine. Nothing wrong with medicine. I love that. But that's kind of the cliche of success.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
In any of these fields, particularly music, arts, you know, social work, I don't care what it is. You can go to the highest level. Mm-hmm. Marion Wright Edelman, who started the Children's Defense Fund, it sounded like when she started that was going to be nothing. You know, how are you going to make money doing that? Mm-hmm. Well, now it's $1 billion not-for-profit. So you can do good and do well.
Yeah.
If you're in the ministry God gave you.
That's one thing I'm thinking about. You said plan B is to get back on plan A.
Right.
But I feel like the question that's going to arise is, what if I don't know what my plan A is?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times, like this is Oakwood is a church school, so we begin class with worship. And I focus on the new covenant, and specifically under the old covenant, we were led by the law. Mm-hmm. Read by what was written in 10 Commandments and the law of Moses, etc. Under the new covenant, we're led by the Spirit. And Spirit is capitalized, which is the Holy Spirit. So again, God is not trying to hide his will and his plan from you. But we're looking for something concrete to tell us what the plan is. Something written, etc. Yeah. We have to learn to live by the Spirit. The Spirit will I've had some frightening experiences with the Holy Spirit. When I say frightening, in terms of clarity. Right. I've had one night, and I won't tell the whole story because it's very personal. But one Friday night, I prayed to God. It's like, look, I need to know what to do at a turning point in my life. And I'm not good with signs. You have to tell me what to, because I have my own mind. I'll interpret the signs to do what I want it to mean what I want it to
right.
mean.
Yeah.
You have to tell me. Okay. The next day I get up, I go to church, and it's Pastor William Winston at Berean in Birmingham at the time. Excuse me, in Atlanta. And he gets up and says, I'm not preaching the sermon I plan to preach. Okay? The Holy Spirit is like moved on me, and I'm going to preach kind of a weird sermon. And it was a very weird sermon. But it was explicitly what I prayed about. And when I say explicitly, not his sermon, his text. And it was in Ezra. I never heard anybody even refer to this text
Ezra.
Ezra. You know, how likely is that? And he read Ezra, and it answered in explicit detail the thing I prayed about. Okay? So that's this. The Holy Spirit will tell you. He's not trying to hide it from. He will tell you, but we have to, just like, God says, my sheep know my voice. Mm-hmm. That's his voice, not like something he wrote. Okay? Yeah. So I can be in a room with, 100 kids, and somebody can say, hey, Daddy.
You know that's your kid.
I know that kid.
Yeah.
I know that's my kid. Because I know her voice. I'm tuned to that because we have a relationship. We talk all the time. And that's how it has to be with finding God's will. He will tell you, but we're used to looking for him to tell us through somebody or, but all of these things, meeting Rod McCowan, meeting Red, it was like God answering my prayers, but my primary prayer is not for things, it's for discernment. Mm-hmm. Because he's always doing something. He's always trying to lead us to his way, but it's like, did you recognize it?
Yeah, I guess maybe the thing is just keep praying. To be honest, that whole time period, how many years was that? That was
like 25
years.
Right.
So we expect this thing to just happen.
Yeah.
But if you keep praying and asking God, when you look back, oh man, I saw a quote a couple of days ago. I can't remember exactly what it said, but the gist of it was like, I'm always asking for something in the future, but I don't realize I'm exactly where I am, what I was asking for before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like we always trying to look forward to see what we need, where we need to be, but you don't realize that you're exactly where you asked to be in the past.
Right.
So I'm like,
or beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Because we that's a great point. We don't live enough in the present.
Right.
Because if you live in the present, then you can see what's around you. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to see that this guy, Rod McCowan, is who I needed to talk to exactly at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. And he had the courage and the knowledge of how to execute this next step. But I still had to have the courage to kind of put myself out there to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say listening to the Spirit and then having the courage to, and it's not even courage, it's just faith. Faith is walking where you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you walk where you can't see, he will keep opening doors and say, yeah, I needed you not to see that because you, in your knowledge, you would have turned left, and I want you to turn right here.
Right. Yeah.
So I had to close left off.
Yep.
And so what we see as failure is really direction.
That's a soundbite right there.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Draw this to a close, but I have one last question. You don't have to answer in super detail, but it's something that I know people struggle with, and I know I've struggled with before. And it's for someone that has an idea or a direction that they want to go. It may not be the most traditional, because sometimes I say it all the time. People who are complaining, well, I don't want to say complaining, but lamenting about their various tests or their medical, whatever, they want to be a doctor, a surgeon, or whatever. Oh, I gotta do all this. I'm like, well, at least you know what you have to do.
Right.
You're gonna go to medical school. You're gonna do this, that, and you're gonna become a doctor.
Right.
Me, I don't know what the heck I'm about to do. So I'm like, be grateful.
Right.
But for someone who's kind of like me, that doesn't necessarily know exactly the path that they're supposed to be going at this moment, or where it's going to end necessarily.
Right.
How do they go about still going in the right direction? Because you don't necessarily have a place that you're looking at where you're trying to go. You're kind of just going with what you think is what you're supposed to be doing, or a gut feeling, or maybe it's this, or maybe it might be some type of vision that doesn't have a title necessarily. For me, I mean, I said it maybe about this time last year, actually, or maybe a little bit under a year ago. My goal in life, and it's kind of weird, and people are probably gonna laugh at me, but it's to be the coolest Christian to like ever walk planet Earth. Like, I want people to see me and be like, I want to be like that guy.
Right.
And he loves God.
Right.
That's how I want it to be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you put that into a career path? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think the career path is, I mean, we're programmed to have a path.
Right.
I think just being clear about your vision. I call it purpose. So, can you articulate in one or two sentences your purpose? Mm-hmm. Not what do you want to be, but what do you want to do? What do you want to change? Okay? Because we get tied up in titles and platforms, and like, I have to be that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what is it that I want to do? And if you walk toward that, because I've been into politics intensely since I was 6. I used to like sports and politics. Right. Nobody ever has to tell me to watch either one. Mm-hmm. They have to tell me to stop. So if you walk in the direction that when God formed you, he didn't just form your face and your legs, he formed the inside of you. Mm-hmm. If you walk towards that, he will open doors. I tell you, I was at Redstone Arsenal when Mrs. Ross called me and said, would you go talk to this guy at 8? That was not my plan when I woke up this morning. Right. But it took care of my next 20 years. It paid for my master's degree, And so walk. The other thing I would say, kind of on a more fleshly level, is be reliable. There are a lot of talented, smart people who depend on their talent and their smarts, but they're not reliable. Mm-hmm. People give opportunities to people that they see as being reliable. Will you keep your word? Will you? Because if you're reliable, we can train you. Mm-hmm. We can make you like the smart person. Mm-hmm. But if the smart person is like hard to work with, won't show up all the time, it's like we can't deal with that.
You can't change that.
But if you're reliable, opportunities will come to you. Because you're walking. And I'll close with this. I tell my students, look for God, commune with him, but walk. Life is going to knock you down. It's like, it's not, life is going to knock you down a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, get up. You have to walk, maybe crawl.
Yeah.
But if you're crawling towards the next door he's going to open. A lot of my friends, and hardest time in life for people like you, or early 20s are hard. It's hard to start your career.
Mm-hmm.
But I have friends who didn't really start into their careers till they were in their early 30s. But the whole time in their 20s, they were walking toward it or crawling toward it. And so when it was time, then it opened up, and this is better than what you were thinking.
Right. Yeah. Patience, man, too.
Yeah.
We want everything to happen now, especially like in this millennial
and
generation.
Frankly, nobody really takes you in the business world that I know. Nobody takes you seriously in your 30s anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The other last thing I'll say, I'll try to make it the last thing, is try to be independent. If you're unemployed, that's the time to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Sometimes, imagine if Bill Gates had gone to work for IBM.
Right.
And he could have.
He could have, yeah.
But instead, he was like, no, I think I'll just do this software thing I like.
Right. Yeah.
Be free. Your generation more than any, because corporate jobs if you get a corporate job, it's not going to last more than 4 or 5 years, because your company will be bought up or laid off. That's the way it is now. They're not long-term jobs. I worked at AT&T 20 years. That doesn't happen anymore. So be entrepreneurial, even if you have a, quote, good job. Always be working on your dream that you own. Like you are now.
There it is. Thank you for listening to this episode. I'm not even going to say I hope you enjoyed. I know you enjoyed that one. That was a good interview. Thank you, Mr. Foster, for just coming in and sitting down. If you haven't already, screenshot that phone, show that you listened to this episode. Give a rating, a review. If you were so inspired by this episode, put a rating, review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps my engagement rates go up. It helps other people kind of see what the podcast is about by reading your reviews and seeing those ratings on the stars under the podcast name. Thank you guys so much for your support. You could follow the Muse Report Podcast at the Muse Report Podcast on Instagram or Facebook and engage with me there. Send me DMs. Who do you want to have on the show next? Give me some feedback. I'm really looking forward to it. I will see you guys next week. Thanks.
Well, that's the end of our MRP episode. Thank you for listening, everything, but it's time to go. We'll have a new one for you next week on the flip side. But until then, don't kill the vibe, subscribe. Don't kill the vibe, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Don't kill the vibe, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Don't kill the vibe, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Don't kill the vibe, make sure you go ahead and subscribe.
Hey guys, Clee here. Thanks so much for listening to the Build Your Vision podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would think you did if you stayed all the way to the end. The best thing that you could do to help support this show is by sharing it with somebody. By you just taking a few seconds to recommend this show to somebody, you are making a huge impact, not only on the success of this show, but possibly on that person's life.